Protecting the country from threats from above. Does his purple underwear signify love? It's Big Man Japan.
Mafia, wake up, wake up.
You have created a monster and it will destroy you.
Big man that is.
Welcome back to the Monsters vs. Men podcast, the bargain basement of the monster podcasting airwaves, where two friends try to stay alive and stay connected by chatting about weekly monster movies. This week, as we stay alive, we are discussing Big Man Japan. With me today is a giant purple underwear wearing monster himself, Alex.
Joined by that flirtatious monster, Eric.
Oh my gosh. Oh geez, Alex.
Oh my god. This movie.
Crazy stuff.
I'm glad
Crazy
we did
stuff.
this one, Eric. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. I'm glad we did this one.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Oh man. Yeah, so this series has been something, Alex. Next couple of weeks we have got a Monster Calls, and then I believe we'll do our kind of a recap episode after that. So before we get into our next series, which we still need to finalize, which we'll probably do a little bit in next week's MVM Plus.
Yes.
So we can talk about that.
Okay.
But yeah, man, I just want to get into this because I think we have got some interesting conversation ahead of us.
Definitely.
And I want to get straight to the point.
I don't know how you couldn't have an interesting conversation about this movie.
No, exactly. So here we go. It might be hard to describe 2007's Big Man Japan, directed by Hitoshi Matsumoto, but one thing is for certain. We haven't watched anything quite like this on Monsters vs. Men. But I'll still ask, Alex, despite the unique and, shall we say, weird nature of this film, what film does Big Man Japan most closely relate to of the films that we've covered on our show, and how does it relate?
How does it relate to movies we've already seen? That's a tough one. You know, obviously the documentary style here is a pretty important factor. Mm-hmm. And I can only recall one of those that we've watched for the show, and that's Troll Hunter. But I also feel like it also has this weird, and this is the early part of the movie, but weird Shaun of the Dead vibe. Right? Where the day in the life vibe in that film, where he's just walking around town, nothing interesting is happening, and then just like these weird conversations that are taking place. Like, I guess that's probably the closest those two would be. Like, this protagonist is just so aloof, it kind of reminds me of that character as well. But he's also more sad. And then, clearly, even minus the ending here, this was inspired, and in some ways, a smart parody of Ultraman. And just the way giant monster movies or giant monster TV shows and tokusatsu kind of plays out. The way it jabs at the goofiness of those series and really leans into some of those clear absurdities. I really enjoy those aspects of it. But I think all of this really comes to a head with the baby monster. And that moment with it is just too great. That if you're listening to this and you haven't watched this movie, I recommend watching it just for that one scene. But Eric, I want to know what you got to say about this before I go too deep.
Yeah, man. Well, to answer my introduction question, the first film I think of is Troll Hunter. In Troll Hunter, we get a weird mix of documentary filmmaking, an eccentric character, and an interesting blend of parody and satire. And, of course, Ultraman, Alex. But there's also an element, I think, of Colossal in here as well. But let's be real. None of these films quite compare to whatever it is we just watched in Big Man Japan. I asked you a couple days ago if you had finished the movie, trying to dig into what you might be thinking about it, and you simply responded in text message with a yes. So I'm definitely curious now to hear more of your impressions, because honestly, I'm still trying to figure out what I really think about this one.
Yeah, so initially in this film, I was watching this film and I was just kind of like, I was just like, I don't know about this. I wasn't jiving with the comedy or the main character. Mm-hmm. That brick gets thrown through his window and he has no reaction, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, maybe just this comedy is just not hitting for me. But then the first monster battle happens, and I am all on board. When he's fighting this thing and is terrible at it, and then he just happens to accidentally defeat the monster by it snapping itself in the face and killing itself. I mean, it floats to heaven. Like, it's so good. And then we get more into the character and see some of the hardships and some of the comedy and obliviousness of the character. And those three elements really actually make this character pretty interesting and deep. And then when you start to care for him and you see some of that depth that he tries to play off as just him not caring, when you get these moments, but then you get these sequences of him like standing outside or doing the ceremony, even, right? When they're filming the ceremony, the cameraman's making them go back, redo parts, and then he's standing inside those giant purple underpants. Like,
oh, it's the best. That's the best scene. That's my favorite scene.
Dude, I was rolling so hard during some of these sequences. And most of the monster sequences are pretty hysterical to me. The stink monster sequence in particular, while not my favorite of the monster sequences, was a completely shocking and hilarious situation that just goes from ludicrous to completely insane. But it's made better by the next sequence, which is the baby drop that I mentioned, right? There's a baby monster that apparently everyone in this city likes, right? The entire time we're made to think that all the monsters are looked at as bad. And then this baby bites our hero's nipple. He drops him by mistake and it kills it. And then everyone hates Big Man Japan. It's so good. It got some of the most solid laughs out of me that I've had in a while with the movie. And it reminded me of these mid-2000s cartoons on Adult Swim that I used to watch all the time. And I have to say, like, this made me quite a bit nostalgic. I haven't felt this way about a movie in a long time. And it's not even to mention, like, the copious amounts of one-liners in the film, which I love a good one-liner. And they're just so perfectly timed. So it's like this 2000s vibe of comedy that was so prevalent during a lot of my time in college and high school, coupled with interesting characters and funny one-liners. I mean, this movie was like, it went from to hitting all the right spot. Well, to hitting all the right points for me, Eric. What about you?
Yeah. No. What's funny though is I think you're right. I think if we had watched this movie when it was released, I think we would have enjoyed it and really found it funny from its quirkiness. Like if we watched this together in college, we would have laughed a lot at the quirkiness of this film. I think I would have enjoyed it more just watching it with you today, right? Like we would have had a good time watching it. But I think what's interesting now is maybe some of that quirkiness didn't work for me as much now as it would have then. But on the other hand, I have a infinitely higher appreciation for what it's doing as far as parody and satire of the tokusatsu genre than I would have then, right? Which I was basically not exposed to at all at that point. So, it's probably a wash for me at that point. And yeah, I think I still think some of this film is quite funny. Some of those mockumentary parts, especially. Some of the body humor parts with the monster battles don't really get me much, but they certainly help create the outlandish tone that this film seems to be going for. And that's a tricky blend, right? Mockumentary and giant monster body humor. But honestly, for what this does, it seems to work. I guess I end up wishing at the end of this film that I had more of a connection to our main character. Though we'll say that might be a hypocritical statement for me because of a couple points I'm about to make. But Masaru, our main character, Big Man Japan, he's wonderfully acted and tragically complex as a character. But parts of me doesn't have sympathy for him. Like maybe I should. I don't know if the film is always trying to build sympathy for him or empathy in that case. Maybe it is sympathy that we feel for him. Like we feel bad for him, but we can't quite relate to what he's going through. We don't have that empathy. I think that's a question we could explore on its own. The one piece, though, that made me feel real sympathy for him was when he tried to act that his meeting with his daughter, which he said was monthly, was no big deal. And then how it's revealed later that it was only once every 6 months. Right. So, yeah, as I told you, I'm still processing here. I mean, maybe I do have a bit of sympathy for the big man, but that's not my main complaint of the film. I think my main complaint is actually the ending. I'm perplexed by the ending. Yes, it's an obvious parody of Ultraman, but to what purpose? What exactly does this add to the movie? I'm left with more questions that don't add up to me than I am with any sort of biting critique or smart satire.
Yeah, I'm definitely in line with you there. I don't understand the ending of this film. The only thing I could think somewhat is that the aliens were supposed to be U.S. based. Because remember, for some reason, well, we know why. He hates the USA because his grandfather didn't like, or his dad didn't like the U.S. Right.
Right.
But he doesn't actually have any personal reason for why he dislikes them. And so, these aliens show up, these Ultramen show up draped in all this flag iconography. Good Lord. I think some of these moments from the finale are funny and, appropriately goofy. And I do like how it jabs at Ultraman for being a bad guy at times, and sometimes needlessly cruel to some of the monsters he kills. Like, it's very clear it's leaning into this point. But that being said, though, it's less about Masaru and more about the parody in these final moments. Which I don't think is a great idea when you focus the entirety of the rest of the film around one man and his day-to-day life. And then we decide to end the movie with this 20-minute segment of him literally sitting in the background between buildings watching a very hokey, overlong, sometimes funny Ultraman parody. It's definitely a net negative when we're taking into account this final sequence. Because when I put the pluses and minuses together of the ending, it just is very rough and just poorly done, really. And but the good news is when I reflect on this ending and I reflect on this movie, I do not think of the ending.
Yeah.
It doesn't even cross my mind.
It's like its own separate sketch in a way.
It is. And Eric, like, we haven't said it, but this is the second time we're recording this episode. I haven't seen this movie in 3 weeks. When we were recording this episode, I was looking over my notes. I was like, oh, I forgot all about that part.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. It's because it feels like it's its own sketch that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I just think of all the outlandish moments that came before.
Yeah.
Even all the way up to that moment where he like trips over his grandfather and accidentally kills him.
Yeah,
Like there's all this funny stuff, and then that.
Yeah, I still think I think it detracts, right? I think it does feel forgotten, but I do think it detracts. But, I still think despite that ending, there's interesting ideas trying to be conveyed here specifically about society's progress and their concern with Big Man Japan. There's a bit of King Kong versus Godzilla here with how Big Man is this giant spectacle, despite culture generally thinking he does more harm than good. The problem, though, is that culture has created Big Man Japan and bought into Big Man Japan when it was a phenomenon. So you're left asking, who would solve the problem if he didn't, right? Like if he wasn't around, what would happen, right? So he's a tragic figure in that sense. He's stuck in this position that he has no real control over, which is why at the beginning of the film, with a couple of things, with the umbrella and the spinach, he keeps remarking about how they grow bigger, quote, when they want to or when they need to versus when they have to, which is the position that he is put in. And it's a position where he really can't have any real relationships except for the relationship with the fourth, being his grandfather, which I would call another misstep of the film, because that relationship had the potential to be the deepest relationship in this film, but it didn't have that much depth. And the ending of the grandfather was outlandish, but also maybe a little callous for me. None of the relationships in this film, unfortunately, match the depth of Masaru as a character. As a character study, there's complexity there, but there's no complexity, unfortunately, in the relationships, which would be another of my main complaints here.
Yeah. I don't really disagree there. While I think the grandfather moments are funny and sometimes sad and interesting, it is done a bit of a disservice to make, killing him like a comedy bit.
A little bit. Yeah.
And it's also a bit of a disservice to, have that moment and then it's never touched upon again, right? Because we decide to go to space.
Yeah.
There's just there's a lot here that's a bit of a, not a lot. There's a good bit though at the final act of this film that causes our problems, and the fact that the Force senile nature comes and goes with the plot is a bit of an issue as well.
Yeah, that's valid. Well, before we get into our awards, Alex, MVM Plus today, we review Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and we see we might have a bit of a disagreement about this one, Alex. Maybe just maybe.
Yeah,
we have a bit of a disagreement.
Just maybe.
Only a little blood is shed. Not too much blood, but some blood might be shed on this one. But you have to listen in to hear our thoughts on Quantumania. That's patreon.com/MVM pod. Patreon.com/MVM pod. All right, Alex. Compelling character. Who do you have?
Yeah, for me, it's got to be the agent. Masaru's agent is like a very terrible person.
Yeah.
To a surprising degree in a lot of ways, right? Because every time he's talking about how he needs money and how he doesn't make much and how he makes so much less than all of his predecessors. And then every time we see her, I love how the movie does this, where she just has a new something every time. A new car, new clothes, new everything. I think it's really funny. And sad in the way it does it. And then our Masaru just doesn't quite connect what's happening.
Yeah.
Which is sad and funny in some ways. And then also the relationship between her and your compelling character, Eric, is also a bit humorous.
Yeah. So my compelling character is the cameraman who multiple times gets distracted here in the film. He really becomes his own character because he is getting distracted, trying to hit on different women, including the agent. He's interesting though, right? Like he tries to get at some points to get Big Man to open up a little bit more. He's a bit perplexed sometimes, you can tell by Big Man's response, which is funny too. So I think there's something there. It is always interesting when that cameraman, who you never see, becomes a character in its own right, and that's what we get here.
Yeah. I just love that he's always hitting on the agent. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What about your most memorable line award?
My most memorable line, it comes from a line early on in the film where it just starts to hit on what the tone of this film will be like. The first conversation that happened on the bus, I believe, I was like, okay, what is the tone here? What is going to I just didn't get anything there. Like, I didn't get any of the comedy. Like, it was so dry. Looking back on it now, I think it's funny still, even that. But it's so dry that I wasn't sure what I was going for. But then we get that moment where the cat comes and is literally eating out of the same bowl as Masaru, Big Man. And the cameraman asks, "Is that your cat?" And Masaru answers, "No, it's not really mine. It comes over sometimes." But he's just letting it eat out of his bowl. And I was like, okay, this is going for that dry, satirical humor. And all right, I can get on this film's wavelength. So that's what stood out to me.
Yeah.
What about you?
My line, my most memorable line is when he says, "We're all strays."
Yeah, like right after that. Yeah.
He's having this. He is right after that, and he's trying to be so deep for these cameramen. Yeah. And trying to be not himself very clearly, because there's no other moments in the film where he's kind of getting. I mean, he slowly becomes less pretentious very quickly. Yeah. In the film, and it's just so funny to see him trying to describe this, what feels like an elegant saying. Right? We're all strays. It's like, oh, yeah. And then he tries to explain it. It's like, oh,
it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, it makes no sense.
It's so good. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
And then, there's also the scene that we talked about, Eric, where, when we did record last time, where his thighs, where they sell his thighs. Is that what it is? Or they sell his...
Yeah. his hips. His hips. Yeah. That is good. That's good. Oh, so good. Yeah, I honestly, I didn't catch the humor of the "we're all strays" part until you pointed it out, and I thought about it some more, and I was like, yeah, that is hilarious. It's just, it made no sense, and it left me scratching my head. But it's so much funnier in retrospect after you've seen the movie and thought about it and know this character more. That comes early on in the film, so you're still trying to figure the character out, but it is funnier after you know the character. What about your Can't Believe That Acting award?
Yeah. Mine's going to go to the Stinky Monster. Nice. She really sold me that she wasn't really that interested in this other thing in the male of her species, because he was too young, not interested in that. And then, she tricked me and she tricked Masaru, because we both fell for it. And then just a second later,
yes,
make it a scene. Anyway, Eric, what about you?
I really liked Hitoshi Matsumoto, who plays Masaru, Big Man Japan here. This movie doesn't work without him. So it's the obvious choice, right? But also just the nuance that this character has to have in being a aloof character who tries to put on these certain airs at times because he's on camera. It's interesting to have a character that's playing a character on camera. right? And that's what we get
right.
here. And so there's layers to that performance that we slowly you start to see it be chipped away more as the film progresses. But I find that chipping away process to be very interesting and well done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And it is, like you said, well done. I really.
What about your that's a good shot award, Alex?
Mine's the shot that really is kind of what made me think of Shaun of the Dead when I was having to reflect on what's similar and what's different between some of the movies we've seen in this one. And that's just Masaru as he's walking with the documentary crew for the first time through the neighborhood, and everyone's giving him those glances. It just had a really cool feel to it. That I really appreciate it. You know, maybe we kind of want to go visit that area. What about you, Eric?
My shot.
You have the real one.
Yeah, it's probably my favorite scene in the movie, and it's the giant purple underwear scene, where at first I'm not sure what's going on, right? Like I'm like, what's this? What are they? Oh, with his face. I love that his face is right there, and like you can literally see like his mouth breathing in the underwear, right?
His face is right where the crotch is. It's wonderful.
It's wonderful. So it's just a great scene to see him straddling that giant underwear. It's so funny, and it's not like a artistic shot, but it's a hilarious shot. That
it's not. It's pretty. It's pretty artistic to me.
It's pretty artistic. All right, unique awards, Alex. I had my favorite monster award. It was actually the first monster, the strangling monster. I thought this was a monster we could actually see in a Ultraman show. I was like, this is an interesting design monster that I could totally see being a real monster in Ultraman.
Right. I could see it, you know, without the head and the comb over.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true. No. Take away that sort of like weird the sort of human quality were more like Attack on Titan-esque.
Yes.
Right?
Very.
Feeling in the monsters. Yes, no. Besides the head, I'm talking more like the body design and power, not the head. The heads were kind of off-putting, not very Ultraman-ish at all. Replace that head with like a different sort of alien-esque head, and you'll have an Ultraman monster.
I think you're right. But the real monster that we all wanted to see, the city's favorite, the baby monster. That moment.
Tokyo's favorite.
Yeah, Tokyo's
baby monster.
favorite. It's so funny, dude. Not in a million years would I have expected this sequence to have occurred. I could have guessed the old woman monster and the young monster. Yeah. I did not foresee where this went.
Right.
And it was perfect. It was perfect.
Me neither, man.
He bit his nipple. I like how he just stands there and is like, because he doesn't know what to do.
Oh, yeah. So bad.
It's great. All right.
All right, man. Final thoughts and tiered rating. I'll go ahead and start. This is a Gamera film for me. I do enjoy it quite a bit. I think the ending takes away a little bit. I don't think it makes a difference as far as my tier is concerned. This isn't a Godzilla tier film without that ending, but it does drop my feelings about it overall. There's a lot that I do appreciate, a lot of the quirkiness that I really enjoy. I enjoy the character study and unique style of this film. So yeah, it's a solid middle of the road, mid-low Gamera tier film for me.
Yeah, I think I'm probably right about in the same area, Eric. This is probably like a mid to high Gamera tier. I would say probably, if I'm being honest, the only thing that kept this from being Godzilla is that final sequence. If that ending didn't exist and the film was supported by focusing on what really mattered in this movie, and that was Masaru, and it kept up the pacing with everything else it was doing and building with this character, It didn't even need like a cohesive resolution or anything.
No.
But anything else would probably have been somewhat better. So that's what really holds it back. So I really do. This is one I would recommend to fans of the genre. But most of them, I would just tell them, like, just stop at this point. Like, stop at this minute mark. You're literally not missing anything.
Yeah. No, you're
but that
not
being
for the
said,
story as a whole, right? As I said, it's like a sketch.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you have the whole credit sequence.
It's just... Right? Yeah. It's just...
very weird.
The whole thing
the credit
is
sequence doesn't the credit sequence does nothing again for the character that we care about in the whole movie. So
yeah, I mean he's almost silent the whole time.
Yeah.
Right? Like that.
Yeah.
The only things that are funny about the finale is just seeing Masaru's timid personality where he's like kind of not wanting to be part of this super team and like trying to get out of things and like that's the only funny part about it. Yeah. For the most part. And then a few of the special moves were kind of funny too, from our Ultramen. But overall, I'll say mid Gamera tier, but this would have been a Godzilla tier had it not been for that last 10, 15 minutes.
Nope, I get it.
But just great characters, really subtly done and very deep. And it's just a shame we didn't use them in our finale.
Yeah, true. All right, man. Next week, a monster calls. Will it have some balls, or will we be singing our criticism squalls, Alex?
Oh, yeah. So I can't wait to hear when a monster calls. Do you think it'll make our ratings falls, or will we be? Or will this movie push us to the walls?
I think both of those sound negative, but we'll take it, Alex. We'll take it.
Maybe it's not a good movie.
As always, thank you for listening to Monsters vs. Men. You can leave us feedback on this episode at mvmpod.com or email us at mvmpod@gmail.com. You can also follow us and message us on Twitter and Instagram at mvm_pod. Become a bargain basement at patreon.com/MVMpod and receive weekly bonus content. Monsters vs. Men is produced by Alex Cornett, executive producer Kevin Alexander, Faye Basier, John Freeman, and Michael Herndon. Special thanks to our wives, Rock Band for PlayStation 3, which forms Cell Block B, Louis Loops, Senior Honda, Drew the Collector, Instagram Connector, and you, the listener, for listening. Until next time, Alex, don't
drop the baby.
And try to stay alive.
Mafia, wake up, wake up.
You have created a monster and it will destroy you.
Sequences are pretty hysterical to me. This thing, my dog just barged into my room. Okay, Louise.